My husband took me to a high-end restaurant for the first time. We ate all evening, but then he just said, "Thanks for dinner," and both, leaving me stuck with the bill. But then a woman, a dishwasher, stepping out from the kitchen, said, "Are you Alexander's daughter? I worked for your father for 20 years. Before he died, he said, 'Give this envelope to my daughter when you see her.' When I opened it, I didn't have, well, my husband. Hello. Write in the comments where you're from. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Enjoy the listen." It all started as if a fairy tale was coming true. Elena Carter, Lynn, was sitting at a window table in the city's most expensive restaurant, the Silver Lantern, and she couldn't believe her luck. She twisted the heavy sterling silver fork in her hands and looked at her husband, Nathan. In their 5 years of marriage, this was the first time he had taken her anywhere like this. Their evenings usually involved sitting in front of the television or at best a modest, hole-in-the-wall spot around the corner. But here, everything was different. The tablecloth was pristine white, starched until it crinkled. A violinist played soft music in the corner. Waiters in sharp vests moved silently like shadows. Lena worked as a waitress at a regular diner on the edge of downtown. She knew the value of every dollar. She knew the smell of cheap cleaner and burnt grease. Here it smelled of money, expensive perfume, and something subtly festive. She felt a little out of place. It seemed like everyone was looking at her simple dress, at her hands that didn't know expensive manicures. But then, she looked at Nathan and the fear receded. Tonight, he wasn't the man he usually was. Silent, detached, constantly glued to his phone. Tonight, he was attentive and gallant. He pulled out a chair, helped her with her coat, and smiled at her like he had in the first days of their courtship. "Order anything you want, Lena," he said, pushing the heavy leather-bound menu toward her. "Tonight is our night." The start of a new life. Her heart started beating faster. A new life. God, how she had waited for this. The last few years hadn't been easy. Nathan had lost his engineering job and relied on odd gigs, often irritable, always saying he wasn't appreciated. Lena had carried the weight of everything, working 7 days a week to pay the bills for the modest apartment her father had left her. She believed it was temporary, that things would turn around for her Nathan, and now it seemed that day had come. "Did something happen?" she asked, her heart pounding. "Did you find a new job?" He smiled mysteriously and ordered the most expensive bottle of Cabernet on the list. "Better, honey, much better. Better. I closed a very profitable deal. Soon we'll forget about your diner like a bad dream. We'll buy a new condo. A new car. You'll stay home like a real lady of the house." As he spoke, Lena watched him, tears streaming down her cheeks. She quickly wiped them away so no one would see. Could it really be true? Had her patience and faith finally been rewarded? The entire evening flew by in a flash. They brought her oysters on the half shell, which she had never tried before. Then came a salad with exotic greens and shrimp the size of her palm. For the main course, Nathan ordered them both a huge ribeye steak, which the chef finished tableside, putting on a whole fire show. Lena ate and felt like the heroine of some foreign movie. She laughed at Nathan's jokes, told him funny stories from the diner that usually just irritated him. But tonight, he listened attentively, nodding and refilling her wine. "I love you so much, Nathan," she whispered as they finished dessert, an airy cake with berries and whipped cream. "I know," he replied. His smile seemed strange to her for a moment, almost cold, but she instantly dismissed the thought. He's probably just tired. The waiter cleared the last plates and silently placed a thick leather folder containing the check in front of Nathan. Lena glanced inside when her husband opened it and saw the total sum. The numbers were astronomical. It was more than her salary for 4 months. Her breath caught for a second, but Nathan looked completely calm. He didn't even flinch. He closed the folder, looked at Lena with a long, scrutinizing gaze, and then slowly stood up from the table. Lena thought he was going to the host stand to pay with a card. He straightened his jacket, walked around the table, and stopped behind her. He leaned close to her ear as if to say something sweet as a farewell. Instead, he spoke clearly and coldly so only she could hear. "Thanks for dinner." Lena didn't understand. She looked up at him, wanting to ask him to repeat himself. But there was such an icy emptiness in his eyes that she felt a chill deep inside. He smiled at her. Not with the warm smile he'd used all evening, but with a wicked, predatory sneer. And after that, he simply turned and walked toward the exit. She stared after him, paralyzed by shock. Her brain refused to process what was happening. There, he goes past the tables. There's the doorman, opening the heavy oak door for him. There he steps out onto the street and disappears into the darkness. Was gone. Just gone. The silence at the table became deafening. The violin music suddenly sounded like a funeral march. Lena sat motionless, staring at the door where her husband had vanished. Maybe it's a joke, a prank. He'll be back in a second with a bouquet of flowers. But he didn't return. Instead, the floor manager was already heading toward her table, a middle-aged man with a neat mustache and an unpleasant appraising look. "Madam, your companion has left," he said in a tone that promised nothing good. "I hope there will be no issues with settling the bill." He tapped the leather folder pointedly with his finger. Lena opened her mouth, but couldn't make a sound. She looked at the enormous amount on the check, then at her own hands. In her small purse, she had a little over $20 until payday and an old flip phone. I don't have it," she stammered, feeling the heat of shame rush to her cheeks. "He's coming back. He probably went to the car for cash." The manager smirked. "We all know those stories. Madam, if you cannot pay the check, I will be forced to call the police." The word police sounded like a gunshot. People at neighboring tables started turning around. Lena felt their curious, judgmental stares. She cringed. She wanted to sink through the floor. The humiliation was physically tangible. It chocked air, making it hard to breathe. "Please don't," she whispered on the verge of tears. I can work it off. I know how to wash dishes." The manager wrinkled his nose in disgust. "We don't need that kind of help. Either you pay or we call the patrol." And at that moment, when it seemed she had hit rock bottom, an older woman emerged from the service door leading to the kitchen. She wore a simple works and a white hairnet. Her face was tired, wrinkled, and her hands were red and rough from the water. Just a dishwasher. She walked resolutely toward their table, ignoring both the manager and the other patrons. She approached, pulled a thick wad of bills secured with a rubber band from her apron pocket, and tossed it onto the table. "Is this enough?" she asked the dumbfounded manager in a hoarse voice. He picked up the money distrustfully, quickly, and expertly counting it. The sum easily covered the check. He looked confusedly from the woman to Lena. "Yes, but who are you?" The woman ignored him. She took Lena by the hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Let's go," she said authoritatively. She dragged the dazed Lena away from the table, away from the humiliating stairs, into a quiet hallway leading to the staff rooms. There, under a dim bulb, amid the smells of bleach and the kitchen, she finally let go of her hand and looked intently into her eyes. "Are you Alexander Carter's daughter?" she asked directly. Lena could only nod. Where did this woman know her father from? A man who had passed away 10 years ago. "I'm Beatrice B. I worked for your father for 20 years. I was his housekeeper." The woman reached into her other apron pocket and pulled out a plain unsealed envelope. "Before Ed died, he told me to find you. He said I should give you this when your husband shows his true colors." B handed her the envelope. Lena's hands were shaking so much she could barely hold it. She expected to see money inside, some assistance, or an explanation, but there wasn't a single bill. Inside lay only one old tarnished key and a piece of paper folded into 4. Lena unfolded the note. The handwriting was painfully familiar, expansive, and confident. Her father's script. The paper contained only a few lines. "The man you married is a snake. He is looking for my confession. Do not let him find it." Lena stared at the note, the letters blurring before her eyes. A snake, a confession. The words were meaningless. Her husband, Nathan, with whom she had shared a bed for 5 years, whom she had loved and felt sorry for, a snake. What confession was he seeking? Her head was spinning. The humiliation at the restaurant, Nathan's icy stare, and now this note from her long-dead father. It all felt like a bad dream. We need to go. Go. Bee's voice brought her back to reality. It was Furman Brooks, no argument. You can't stay here. Bee took a hand again, and Lena obediently followed her like a child. She was still clutching the key and the note in her other hand. They exited through the restaurant's back door into a dark, foul-smelling alley. The city noise assaulted her ears. Just an hour ago, she had been sitting in quiet luxury. Now she was standing next to dumpsters, and her life was crumbling before her eyes. "Where are we going?" Lena whispered. "Where that key leads," Bee answered curtly, pulling her out onto a lit street and raising a hand to flag down a taxi. "Your father prepared for everything." A beat-up older sedan with a grumpy driver pulled over, but gave an address on the other side of the city, some industrial district Lena had never heard of. They got into the back seat. Lena stared out the window at the flashing lights, but she saw nothing. The scene at the restaurant played over and over in her mind. Nathan's smile, his words, "Thanks for dinner." How could she have been so blind? How had she not seen that cruelty in him before? She remembered all those years. His constant complaints about the lack of money, his vague stories about projects that were supposedly about to hit it big, his irritation when she asked for details. She had blamed it all on bad luck and male pride, but it turned out he had been playing a role the whole time. He lived with her, slept with her, ate her food, knowing that he would eventually use her and discard her. Why? To find this confession. What is this confession? She asked Bee, breaking the silence in the car. I don't understand. Bee looked at her for a long time with her faded but surprisingly penetrating eyes. Alexander C. was a complicated man, she said slowly. He made many enemies and left behind many secrets. He said that when the time came, you would understand for yourself. The car turned off the main boulevard and drove down a broca road past fences and warehouses. Finally, the driver stopped outside a long one-story building made of gray brick with rows of identical metal doors. A self-storage complex. A place where people keep what doesn't fit into their apartments and their lives. Here we are, the driver grumbled. Bee paid the fare and helped Lena out of the car. The air here was cold and smelled of damp and rust. Under the dim lamps on the posts, endless corridors of garage-like doors stretched out. Number 214, Bee said, and they walked along the row, scrutinizing the numbers. What could her father be storing in a dump like this? Finally, they found the right door. A huge padlock hung on the hasp. Open it! Bee nodded. Lena brought the key to the lock. Her hands were shaking so much, she couldn't get it into the keyhole. The key was old and jagged and refused to slide in. She fumbled with it, biting her lip from the tension, feeling utterly helpless. At that moment, the silence was broken by the sound of an approaching car. Lena froze. A familiar dark sedan, Nathan's car, slowly pulled around the corner. The headlights cut through the gloom, momentarily blinding them. Lena's heart sank. New. He realized Bee had given her the envelope and had followed them. Hurry, Bee hissed, stepping between Lena and the car, trying to shield her with her body. The car stopped about 10 yards away. The door didn't open. He just sat there in the darkness and waited, watching. That fact was scarier than any chase. Panic gave Lena strength. She forcefully shoved the key into the lock and turned it. A loud, rusty click rang out. She tugged the lock. Grabbing the handle, she pulled the heavy metal door upward. It scraped deafeningly along the tracks. Go inside, Bee commanded, pushing her in. They found themselves in a dark, cold space. Bee flipped the switch by the entrance, and a solitary, dusty light bulb flickered on overhead. The unit was almost empty. Against the far wall stood an old desk, a couple of chairs, and several boxes covered with a yellowed sheet. Everything was coated in a thick layer of dust, but in the center of the desk sat a small metal box, like a document safe. It was clean, as if placed there recently. B quickly closed the door behind them, cutting them off from the glare of Nathan's car. They were left in the silence, broken only by the humming of the lamp and the furious pounding of Lena's heart. "He's waiting for us to come out," Lena said, looking at the slit under the door. "Then we need to find what we came for and leave another way," B replied calmly, as if she had a plan ready for any contingency. She walked over to the box. It had a simple combination lock. "Your father said the code is the day you'd never forget." Lena looked at her bewilderedly. What day? She had many memorable days, her wedding day, but that thought now only caused nausea. Her father's death day. "He deeply loved your mother," B softly prompted. "He always said the day he met her was the only truly happy day of his life." Lena strained her memory. Her father rarely spoke of her mother, who had died when Lena was a child, but she remembered one story. He once told her he first saw her mother at a community fair. She was carrying a bouquet of lilacs. It was June 12, 2004. She walked to the box and, with trembling fingers, entered the 4 digits. Click. The box opened. Inside, resting on a red velvet lining, was a neat stack of papers. The title page typed on a machine was on top. Lena picked it up. The headline read, "The Confession of Alexander R. Carter." She started to read and the floor dropped out from under her. It was a cold, detailed, legally precise document. In it, her father described step by step how, in the early 90s, he had defrauded his first business partner, the father of her half-sister, Sophia. He recounted how he had deliberately understated profits, moved assets to shell companies, and created fictitious debts. Ultimately, he forced the partner to sell his stake in their joint business for a effectively leaving him with nothing. And then a few years later, the man died of a heart attack in complete poverty. Everything was sealed with her father's signature at the bottom of every page, the bold, confident signature she had known since childhood. This was Italiano. This was what Nathan was looking for. Now everything made sense. Sophia, her half-sister, had always hated her. She believed their shared father had robbed her family, leaving everything to Lena. Apparently, she had been searching for proof all these years, and she had found Nathan, or he had found her. They conspired. He was supposed to gain Lena's trust, marry her to get into her house, into her life, and find this document, a document that gave Sophia the right to challenge all transactions and claim her father's entire company. 5 years of her life, her love, her marriage, it was all just part of this monstrous plan. "They planned all this," Lena whispered, dropping the papers onto the desk. "He married me just for this." "I know," B said softly. "Your father figured it out, too. He sensed Sophia would stop at nothing. So he hid this here and told me to watch." Suddenly, footsteps sounded outside. Someone tried the warehouse door handle. Nathan, he hadn't waited. "We have to go." B snatched the papers, shoved them back into the box, and put the box into a large shopping tote bag that was standing in the corner. There must be a back exit, she shone. Flashlight from her old phone, and found a small, nearly invisible door in the far wall. Fortunately, it was locked from the inside with a simple bolt. A minute later, they were in another, even darker and narrower passage between the rows of units. They ran blindly, stumbling over trash until they emerged onto the next street. They walked a safe distance and stopped to catch their breath. Lena leaned against the cold brick wall. In her hands, she held the bag with the cursed metal box, which now felt incredibly heavy. She had lost her husband, lost faith in her father, and lost 5 years of her life. What else could happen? At that moment, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out. The name Sophia glowed on the screen. Cold sweat broke out. Why was she calling? She couldn't know the plan had failed. Taking a deep breath, Lena pressed the answer button. Hello. Her voice sounded weak and uncertain. Sophia's laughter echoed through the receiver, icy, triumphant. Lena, what are you doing? She mumbled. You were evicted. Men came this afternoon, changing the locks. Your sister ordered it. Said you don't live here anymore. Lena's legs buckled. She leaned against the wall to keep from falling. It was true then. Oh. Of Italiano. When she staggered back downstairs, supported by B, she saw them. Leaning against a luxury imported car by the entrance was Sophia. She was wearing an elegant cashmere coat, her hair styled perfectly. Beside her stood a man in a sharp suit holding a briefcase, an attorney. A triumphant smile played on Sophia's face. She looked at Lena the way one looks at a crushed insect on the road. What's wrong, little sister? Can't get into your home? Her voice was sweet as honey and sharp as a razor. Don't worry. I'll take care of your things. I'll throw everything on the curb so no trace of you is left here. We, Soph, was all Lena could whisper. For everything, Sophia spat, her beautiful face contorted by a grimace of hatred. For your father leaving mine with nothing. For you living in this apartment while we bounced around in rentals. For you having everything and me having nothing. Now justice has been served. The lawyer stepped forward and silently handed Lena several sheets of paper. Elena K. and Carter, please review this. This is a copy of the agreement. Transferring the property, rights to the apartment to settle the debt. Obligations of your spouse, Nathan T. Carter, to Sophia K. Carter. Everything is notarized based on the general power of attorney you signed. The apartment no longer belongs to you. Any attempt to enter will be treated as a criminal offense. Lena stared blankly at the papers. She saw the embossed seals, the fancy signatures. She saw Nathan's flourish, so familiar, so beloved, and now so monstrous. In one evening, she had become homeless, a beggar. Let's go, Lena, B said firmly, pulling her away from that spot. There's nothing left for us here. Sophia laughed after them. That laughter haunted Lena all the way in the taxi into the complete unknown. They arrived at a housing project on the other side of the city, pulling up to a gray, unremarkable 9-story building. They took the damp-smelling elevator up to the 7th floor. B opened a simple vino-covered door with a key. Come in. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom, but surprisingly clean and nothing superfluous. Old but sturdy furniture. Starched curtains on the windows. Floors cleaned until they gleamed. It smelled of cleanliness and herbs. A bunch of dried mint hung in the corner. This place was the complete opposite of the chaos that raged in Lena's soul. Sit down. B pointed to a simple chair in the kitchen. She put the kettle on the stove and took out 2 mugs. Her movements were slow, steady, and calming. Lena sat down. The bag with the cursed box fell to the floor at her feet. She buried her face in her hands. I have nothing left. Absolutely nothing. Where do I go now? What? Do? Ido. Lena, what are you doing? She mumbled. You were evicted. Men came this afternoon, changing the locks. Your sister ordered it. Said you don't live here anymore? Lena's legs buckled. She leaned against the wall to keep from falling. It was true then. All of Italiano. When she staggered back downstairs, supported by B, she saw them. Leaning against a luxury imported car by the entrance was Sophia. She was wearing an elegant cashmere coat, her hair styled perfectly. Beside her stood a man in a sharp suit holding a briefcase. An attorney. A triumphant smile played on Sophia's face. She looked at Lena the way one looks at a crushed insect on the road. What's wrong, little sister? Can't get into your home. Her voice was sweet as honey and sharp as a razor. Don't worry. I'll take care of your things. I'll throw everything on the curb so no trace of you is left here. We, Soph, was all Lena could whisper. For everything, Sophia spat, her beautiful face contorted by a grimace of hatred. For your father leaving mine with nothing. For you living in this apartment while we bounced around in rentals. For you having everything, and me having nothing, now, justice has been served. The lawyer stepped forward and silently handed Lena several sheets of paper. Elena King Carter. Please review this. This is a copy of the agreement, transferring the property rights to the apartment to settle the debt. Obligations of your spouse, Nathan T. Carter. 2. Sophia K. Carter. Everything is notarized based on the general power of attorney you signed. The apartment no longer belongs to you. Any attempt to enter will be treated as a criminal offense. Lena stared blankly at the papers. She saw the embossed seals, the fancy signatures. She saw Nathan's flourish, so familiar, so beloved, and now so monstrous. In one evening, she had become homeless, a beggar. Let's go, Lena, B said firmly, pulling her away from that spot. There's nothing left for us here. Sophia laughed after them. That laughter haunted Lena all the way in the taxi into the complete unknown. They arrived at a housing project on the other side of the city, pulling up to a gray, unremarkable 9-story building. They took the damp-smelling elevator up to the 7th floor. B opened a simple vinyl-covered door with a key. Go in. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom, but surprisingly clean and well-kept. Nothing superfluous, old but sturdy furniture. Starched curtains on the windows. Floors cleaned until they gleamed. It smelled of cleanliness and herbs. A bunch of dried mint hung in the corner. This place was the complete opposite of the chaos that raged in Lena's soul. Sit down. B pointed to a simple chair in the kitchen. She put the kettle on the stove and took out 2 mugs. Her movements were slow, steady, and calming. Lena sat down. The bag with the cursed box fell to the floor at her feet. She buried her face in her hands. I have nothing left. Absolutely nothing. Where do I go now? What? Do? Ido. To him, she was just a stranger sitting in his mother's kitchen late at night. The ordinariness of the situation made it even more surreal. Jordan, this is Elena Carter, B said quietly. She didn't use the last name, but there was something special in the way she said it. Alexander R.'s daughter. Jordan nodded. His expression didn't change. Pleased to meet you, Jordan. He walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and pulled out a bottle of iced tea. The movement of a simple working man returning home after a shift. Lena couldn't tear her eyes away from him. She couldn't breathe. Her mind frantically searched for an explanation. Distant relatives. An incredible coincidence. She shifted her gaze to B, and by the expression on the older woman's face, she understood everything. It held bitterness, pride, and some kind of deep-seated pain. Yes, Lena, B said, answering her silent question. She sat down at the table and folded her working hands. Jordan is Alexander R.'s son. Your brother. The air rushed out of Lena's lungs with a whoosh. A brother. She had a brother, and he was the son of a woman she had thought was just the hired help in her father's house her whole life. Jordan, who was just opening the bottle, froze. He slowly turned to his mother. His face was a mask of utter confusion. Mom, what are you talking about? Alexander Ara's daughter. My father died when I was little. You told me yourself. I told you what I had to tell you, B replied firmly, looking her son straight in the eyes. To protect you. Alexander R. was your father, Jordan. He loved you more than anything in the world. And he loved me. She said it plainly, without drama, as if stating a long-known fact. And because of that simplicity, the words gained a crushing power. Lena listened, and the last stronghold of her world, her past, crumbled before her eyes. Her entire life, all her memories, suddenly appeared in a different, uglier light. Her father, who had always seemed a little distant, preoccupied with his affairs. His frequent business trips, after which he returned tired, but somehow peaceful. His generosity toward B, whom he kept employed even after Lena's mother died, even though there was no need. He wasn't just supporting a former housekeeper, he was supporting his second true family, and her. Who was she in the scheme? She recalled the expensive dresses, the best tutors, the trips to the coast. All of it was there, but was there warmth in it? Was there love? Or was it just an obligation? The creation of a respectable shop window for society, while the real life, the real feelings unfolded secretly nearby. She, Elena Carter, the legitimate daughter, the heiress, was just a facade, a cover, a respectable extra in a play where the main role was played by this unknown boy who was hidden from everyone, like the most precious treasure. He was protected from the family toxicity, as B put it, while she, Lena, was left right in the center of it, next to the hateful Sophia. The fake confession, its meaning, was now crystal clear. It wasn't just bait. It was a game of genius cruelty. Her father knew Sophia's greedy nature. He tossed her the bait and waited, and she, Lena, was just a tool in that game. Through her marriage to the hired Nathan, this bait was supposed to fall into her sister's hands. Her father used her, his own daughter, as a pawn to expose his other daughter's greed, and his true heir, his son, he kept safe, far from the dirt. The thought left her cold and empty. Nathan's betrayal was a knife wound, but the realization of how her own father had used her was like a slow poison seeping into every cell of her body. Her life was a lie from start to finish. Jordan stood in the middle of the kitchen with a bottle of iced tea in his hand, utterly stunned. He looked from his mother to Lena, and his eyes, so much like his father's, showed profound shock. So my whole life, he began and trailed off. At that moment, someone started banging on the door. Not knocking, banging. Someone was hitting it forcefully with a fist or a foot, making the thin wall vibrate. Open up, Lena. I know, you're in there. Give me the box. Open the door, I said. Nathan's voice, distorted by rage and despair. He had found them. B jumped up and rushed to the door to check the lock. Jordan instinctively stepped forward, shielding his mother, but Lena sat motionless. She was no longer afraid of anything. What else could he take from her? There was a crack. The flimsy lock didn't hold. The door burst open and Nathan appeared on the threshold. He looked like a cornered animal. His jacket was torn, his face filled with madness. The box! He screamed, barging into the apartment. His eyes were fixed on the bag at Lena's feet. Give it to me. It's my only chance. He lunged at her, but Jordan blocked his way. He was taller and stronger than Nathan. Who the hell are you? Nathan snarled, trying to shove him aside. Get out of the way. And then he froze. His rage-filled gaze focused on Jordan's face. He scrutinized his features, and the fury on his face changed to bewilderment turned to confusion, and confusion turned to slow, soul-chilling horror. He looked from Jordan to Lena, then back to Jordan, like an accountant checking his ledger. The figures in his head added up to a monstrous picture. He knows everything. I'm done for, he whispered, stepping back. There was no more anger in his voice, only a dull hopelessness. He realized he had chased a fake while the real bomb, the real secret, stood right in front of him. And that secret made the paper confession useless trash. He backed toward the exit. His face was white as a sheet, but then he stopped. His eyes moments ago, full of terror, suddenly narrowed. A new cold and calculated spark flashed in them. He looked at them again, frightened B, stunned Jordan, and devastated Lena. No, he said quietly, and a new snake-like note entered his voice. You're done for. I'll just be left with nothing. But you. He flashed, a crooked, terrible grin. If Sophia finds out about him, she won't just take the company. She kill him. Nathan's words hung in the suffocating air of the tiny kitchen. He turned and without another word left, slamming the broken door behind him. His footsteps faded on the stairs. A ringing silence fell over the apartment. B, Jordan, and Lena stood like three statues, each consumed by their own horror. Jordan was the first to stir. The shock on his face turned to anger and confusion. He stepped toward his mother. Mom, what does all this mean? Who is that man? Why is he saying someone wants to kill me? This is crazy. He raised his voice at her for the first time in his life. All his life, he had lived quietly and simply. He worked as a lighting and sound technician at the Community Arts Center, fixing amplifiers and changing light bulbs. His world consisted of understandable things: work, home, and caring for his aging mother. And now, in 1 hour, that world had exploded from within. Quiet, son. Quiet? Bea grabbed his hand. Her face was gray with fear. That's Lena's husband, ex-husband. He works for Sophia, Lena's sister. I don't care who works for whom. Jordan shouted. What? Secrets? What? Alexander R. I thought my father was a plumber who died of a heart attack. Lena looked at him, and for the first time during this endless evening, she felt not her own pain, but someone else's. This man, her suddenly found brother, was just as much a victim of her father's schemes as she was, only he was protected by a lie and she was used as a human shield. She took a step forward. Jordan. Her voice was what Nathan said is true. My sister Sophia believes her father cheated hers. She's obsessed with the money and the company. If she finds out about you, she'll see you as the only threat. And she will stop at nothing. My father hid you your whole life for exactly that reason. The rest of the night passed in a fog. No one slept. Jordan paced the single room, trying to process that he was the son of one of the city's wealthiest men and simultaneously a target for his crazy half-sister. Bea sat in the kitchen, sorting through old photographs and quietly weeping. And Lena settled on the windowsill, staring at the indifferent lights of the sleeping city. She had no more tears. Humiliation, betrayal, lies. All of it had scorched her from the inside, leaving only a cold, ringing emptiness. Somewhere out there in the city was her apartment, now controlled by Sophia. Somewhere out there was Nathan, who had betrayed her. And here, in this tiny, unfamiliar apartment, was her brother, who was in mortal danger. And the cause of it all was her marriage, her night. The new phase of the nightmare began in the morning. Lena's phone, which she had forgotten to charge, suddenly came alive, buzzing with messages. She looked at the screen in surprise. Dozens of messages from colleagues at the diner, from distant acquaintances. Lena, is what they're saying on the news true? And in there. What's going on with you? Bea found the right website on her old tablet. The front page of the local business portal. A large headline. Scandal in the Carter family. Daughter accuses deceased father of fraud. Beneath the headline was a photo of a glowing Sophia against the company logo. The article stated that Sophia Carter had called an emergency shareholders meeting. She claimed to have discovered documents that conclusively proved her father, Alexander Carter, had illegally seized the business by defrauding his partner. The article ended with a few venomous lines, suggesting that the other daughter, Elena, supposedly knew about the documents and, along with her husband, was hiding them to try to blackmail Sophia. She didn't even wait, Lena whispered. She doesn't have the confession, but she's acting like it's in her pocket. She's creating noise, pressuring the shareholders, destroying my reputation. Something clicked inside her. A strange, stubborn feeling. Se stood up. I have to go to work. Are you crazy? Bea exclaimed. You can't show up there after an article like that. That's exactly why I have to go there, Lena said firmly. It's the only thing I have left. I can't just sit here and wait for her to grind me into dust. She put on her work uniform, a simple apron and hair covering. These clothes had always been a symbol of hard work and a modest life for her. Today, they felt like armor. When she walked into the diner, the low roar of conversation instantly died. Everyone. The cooks, the cashier, her co-worker, Mira, with whom she shared all her secrets, looked at her, not with sympathy, but with curiosity, fear, and a degree of disdain, as if she were a leper. No one greeted her. Mira immediately turned away and began fiercely wiping down a table that was already clean. Mr. Donovan, the manager, emerged from his office. His round face was crimson and sweaty. Carter, in my office now. She walked into his cramped office, which smelled of paper and cheap coffee. He didn't offer her a seat. Elena K. I read the internet, he began, stammering. I had calls from the city council asking. He didn't finish. The diner's front door flew open, making the glasses clink by the wash sink. Sophia stood on the threshold, wearing a costly cashmere coat, high heels, perfect makeup, and an immaculate hairstyle. Behind her loomed her lawyer and a young man with a professional camera. Sophia swept the room with a scornful look, as if choosing which patch of dirt to step on. Then she saw Lena in the office doorway and smiled a predatory, victorious smile. She walked to the center of the hall, and all the patrons, workers from the nearby factory, seniors, students, froze, with their spoons Well, there she is. Sophia's voice, amplified by the empty room's acoustics, sounded like the crack of a whip. Our little modest worker, Elena Carter. Lena stepped out of the office. She knew she had to do this. She couldn't hide. Look at her, Sophia continued, reveling in the effect she was having. Her finger, covered in a costly glove, pointed at Lena. She pretends to be a hapless victim, but in reality, she is an accomplice to a thief and a fraud. Her husband, Nathan Carter. They conspired. They stole and hid our father's dying confession, in which he repents for stealing this company. They wanted to sell that document to me. They blackmailed me. The camera in the journalist's hands clicked, the flash blinding her eyes. Lena stood in the middle of the hall, dozens of eyes fixed on her. In those stares, she saw the same thing she had seen yesterday in the restaurant, only multiplied 100 times. Judgment, contempt, malice. These people for whom she poured soup every day and wished a pleasant meal now looked at her like dirt. She disgraces the honest name of our family, Sophia thundered. People like her don't belong among decent folk. Mr. Donovan? The manager, white as the milk in his cooler, dashed out of his office. He approached Lena, avoiding her eyes. Carter, he mumbled, loud enough for everyone to hear. In light of the circumstances that have come to light, I am forced to suspend you from work. Pending investigation. Leave your uniform. And please leave. This was the end. Complete, total, public destruction. Lena silently removed her apron, took off her hairnet, placed them on the nearest table, and walked toward the exit amid the whispers, the scornful stares, and the camera clicks. She stepped out onto the street and didn't feel the cold autumn wind. Everything inside her had been burned away. Home, money, husband, job, reputation. Sophia had left her with nothing. She walked down the street without looking where she was going. Her legs automatically carried her to the old park where she loved to sit with her father as a child. She sank onto a cold bench and suddenly understood one simple thing. When everything is taken away from you, your fear is taken away, too. There was nothing left to be afraid of. Rock bottom had been reached. And since that was the case, she could finally stop being a victim. She could start taking action. Sophia had built her entire attack on a lie, on a fake confession she didn't even possess. She was fighting with a cardboard sword. But Lena, she had the truth. A terrible, dangerous truth. Her brother, Jordan, hiding him further, was senseless. Nathan knew, and that meant it was only a matter of time before Sophia knew, too. The threat wouldn't disappear. It would hang over their heads forever. The only way to defuse a bomb was to detonate it herself at the right time and in the right place. The decision came instantly. Cold, clear as ice. Lena got up from the bench. She was no longer the crushed, humiliated waitress. She was Alexander Carter's daughter, and she was going to war. She pulled out her phone and called B. B. Hi. Please find out where and when the shareholders' meeting is taking place. We're going, all of us. The conference room at the city's main business center was full. It smelled of expensive perfume, leather, and money. Solid men and women, shareholders, partners. The city elite sat at a long table. Sophia sparkled at the podium. She was in her element, speaking about honor, justice, and legacy. She waved some papers around, promising the imminent triumph of truth. At that moment, the door to the hall opened. Lena walked in wearing the simple dress she had left the house in yesterday. She looked like a sparrow who had flown into an eagle's feast. Behind her, standing by the entrance, were Bea and a pale but resolute Jordan. All heads turned toward her. Sophia's musical speech cut off mid-sentence, her face contorted with fury. "What are you doing here? Security, escort her out." But Lena was already walking down the center aisle straight toward the podium. She didn't look at anyone, only at her sister. She approached, took the second microphone from the stand, and turned to the hall. Her voice, amplified by the speakers, sounded unexpectedly loud and clear. "Sophia is telling the truth," she said. Bewildered silence fell over the hall. Sophia froze with her mouth open. "My father truly had a secret," Lena continued. "A huge secret that he kept his whole life." She paused, surveying the frozen faces of the shareholders, then slowly turned and looked toward the back of the room at Jordan. "But his secret isn't the fake confession she's talking about." Metal rang in her voice. She raised her hand and pointed at her brother. "His secret is him, his son." For a fraction of a second, an absolute ringing silence reigned in the huge room. 100 pairs of eyes stared first at Lena, then at Jordan, standing by the entrance, and finally at Sophia's face, contorted with rage and confusion. That second seemed like an eternity, and then the hall exploded. It wasn't just noise. It was chaos. The shareholders, gray-haired, respected people in the city, jumped from their seats. Someone shouted. Someone else started talking to their neighbor, waving their hands. The journalist, Sophia, had dragged along, regained his senses, and started clicking his camera, pointing the lens at Jordan. A lie. The scream cut through the general noise. Sophia, having recovered, looked like a fury. Her face was crimson. Her perfect hairstyle was This is a brazen, monstrous lie. She's gone mad with grief. She hired an actor. Security. Remove this imposter. Lena remained motionless. She let them all shout. She allowed the chaos to reach its peak, and when the first wave of noise began to subside, she brought the microphone back to her lips. "Jordan, please come up." Her voice was calm. This contrast with Sophia's hysteria had a sobering effect on the hall. Everyone fell silent again, staring at the door. Jordan froze, blinded by the flashes and glued to the spot by 100 stares. Confusion was written all over his face. But Bea was standing beside him. She put her hand on his shoulder and quietly said something. Jordan took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and walked forward. He walked down the long aisle past the rows of expensive chairs. A simple man in his best but modest clothes, and the closer he got to the podium, the quieter the hall became because now everyone could see him clearly. Now everyone could see what Lena had seen that night. The resemblance wasn't just noticeable. It was absolute, undeniable. It was the face of Alexander Carter as they remembered him 30 years ago. Same ills, the same strong chin, the same posture. A whisper went through the rows. "Look, he's the spitting image of Carter. I remember him like that when they were just starting out. Unbelievable." Jordan walked up and stood next to Lena, looking not at the hall but at Sophia. There was no hatred in his eyes, only heavy, oppressive confusion. "He is not an actor," Lena continued just as calmly. "He is my brother." And this, she pointed to Bea, who had followed. "Beatrice Reed. She worked for my father for 20 years, and she is Jordan's mother." Bea stepped forward. In her hands was a simple cardboard folder, tied with string. She silently untied it and laid several yellowed letters and a stack of bank receipts on the table, in front of the chairman, a gray-haired old man wearing glasses. "These are Alexander's letters to me and my son. Over 30 years," she said quietly, but clearly. Her voice trembled, but it held strength. "And these are the monthly transfers for clothes, for school, for life. Alexander never abandoned his son for a single day." The chairman picked up one of the letters, holding it close to his eyes. Everyone knew the expansive handwriting of the company's founder. He looked up at Jordan, 10 at Sophia, and confusion was reflected on his face. Sophia looked at the letters, the receipts, and Jordan's face, and her confidence began to crack. She realized this wasn't a bluff. It was the truth. And this truth was scarier for her than any fake confession. An illegitimate son, an heir, all her struggle, all her hatred, her entire life built on a sense of injustice. It all turned out to be meaningless. Her father hadn't cheated her. He had cheated all of them. And what does this change? She shouted, trying to regain control of the situation. So, he had a bastard. It means nothing. He is nobody. He has no rights. Where is the will? Show me the will. The hall buzzed again. The question was valid. A son was one thing, but legal rights were something else entirely. Without a will, he was just as much an heir as she and Lena. Or perhaps, not one at all. Here is the will, Lena said. She bent down and lifted the heavy tote bag from the floor. The locks clicked, and she pulled the metal box from it. More accurately, here is the document my sister was so desperately searching for. She took the stack of papers from the box. The same confession of her father's. She held it high above her head so everyone could see. Here is the lie that Sophia used to take my home. Here is the lie she used to publicly humiliate me. Here is the paper that, according to her, gives her the right to everything. She swept the room with a heavy gaze, then turned and walked to the wall where a decorative fireplace with artificial flame was built into a niche. She pressed a button. Tongues of fire danced behind the glass. Before the eyes of the stunned shareholders, she began tossing the confession into the fire, sheet by sheet. No! Sophia screamed, but it was too late. The paper quickly blackened, curled up, and turned to ash. A dead silence fell over the hall, broken only by the quiet hum of the fire and Sophia's ragged breathing. The shareholders watched the spectacle with horror. She was destroying the document, the only document around which the entire conflict revolved. She was creating a legal vacuum. When the last sheet vanished into the flames, Lena turned off the fireplace and turned back to the hall. Sophia, going insane, lunged at her. She grabbed Lena's arm, her nails digging into the skin. "What have you done, you idiot?" she hissed, loud enough only for them to hear. "You think this is the end? Where is the real will? The one that names him an heir? I know it exists. I could feel Dad was capable of this." "Calm down, Soph. You lost. You lost." Sophia's eyes burned with hatred. "Give it to me or I'll tell Nathan's creditors that all the assets are with him. They won't leave him alive. They'll bury him in the woods." "You think I feel sorry for him? I only feel sorry that he won't be able to pay me back." And at that moment, B, standing nearby, took a step forward. She calmly unzipped her old purse, rummaged inside, and pulled out an official folded form. Embossed paper, notarized seal. She held it out. "Are you looking for this, Sophia?" It was the real will. Sophia's eyes were fixed on the document. This was her chance, her only chance. She tore her arm free with an animal snarl and lunged at B, trying to snatch the paper. "Give it to me." "It to me." But Lena was faster. With one fluid motion, she took the will from B's hands, beating her sister by a split second. Sophia clutched at the air. Lena didn't read it. She didn't show it to anyone. She simply turned and walked back to the fireplace. "Lena? No!" It was Jordan's voice. He understood everything. He realized that in her hands was his future, his inheritance, all the life he had never had. Sophia screamed like a wounded wolf and rushed after her. But it was too late. Lena turned the fire back on. For a moment, she held the will over the flame, looking directly into the eyes of her approaching sister, and then simply released her fingers. The document dropped into the fire and instantly burst into flames. Do you believe that the noble goal, restoring justice and protecting the family, justifies such harsh methods? Could she have acted differently? And what would you have done in her place, having hit rock bottom when absolutely everything had been taken from you? And of course, I'm curious about what happened next. Would you like me to read the continuation of this story for you? What became of Sophia left at the broken trough, caught in her own trap? Was Nathan able to extricate himself from the predicament they sent him into? And most importantly, were Lena and Jordan, two people, essentially strangers, bound only by the blood of a father one barely knew, and the other had learned not to respect, were they able to become a real family and manage his legacy together? If you have any questions about this story, or perhaps some curious guesses of your own, be sure to write everything in the comments. I'd be very interested to read your opinion. And of course, if you liked this story, please, like Italiano, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new, equally exciting stories, and share your opinion in the comments below. Your support is the most important thing to us. I wish you peace of mind and loyal people by your side. All the best. At the end of this video, a box will appear in the middle of the screen. Please click on that box. Our other most interesting stories will be